I didn't realize you could lose a family without anyone dying. Not at first. At 8 years old, I thought love was something you could count on, like bedtime, like dinner, like the way your mother's arms were supposed to feel when she pulled you close. Then I got a doll for my birthday, and within a week, no one touched me again. The Doll That Wouldn't Share by NoSleep Scribe. I'm telling you this because cursed things don't always come with chains. Sometimes they come with lace. Sometimes they come with a ribbon. Sometimes they come with a little paper label that looks harmless enough to be ignored. I got her for my 8th birthday, not from my parents, from someone they didn't invite. When I came home from school, she was already sitting on my bed, propped against my pillow like she'd been waiting all day. Her dress was pale pink and old-fashioned, the kind of fabric that should have yellowed with time but somehow hadn't. Her hair fell in perfect curls. Her eyes were brown glass, wide and wet-looking, like she'd just finished crying. My mother stood in the doorway with her hands clasped too tight. My father stayed behind her, half in the hall, like the room itself had teeth. They didn't ask who it was from. They seemed to already know, though. They treated her more like an obligation than a gift. "Pick her up," my mother said, too quickly, like she was repeating instructions she'd been given. "Isn't she beautiful?" "You'll sleep better with her next to you," my father advised. I stared at the doll, and I felt something I didn't have a word for yet. Not fear, not love, relief. Because I was lonely in a way adults didn't take seriously. Lonely like a locked room. Lonely like you could scream and no one would hear it because you didn't know how to make the sound right. Lonely like my skin hurt for warmth. The doll's wrist had a ribbon tied around it. A thin paper tag dangled from the bow. "She only wants to be held." That was all. No name, no happy birthday, no signature, just a rule. I picked her up. She was warm. Not warm from sunlight or from being near a vent. Warm like she'd been pressed against a body. Warm like something alive had been holding her before me. My mother let out a breath she'd been holding. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't have nightmares. I didn't wake up thirsty. I didn't wake up crying for no reason. I fell asleep with her tucked under my chin, and I stayed asleep. The next morning I rolled over and saw the bruises on my arm. Small, round, purple marks in neat little rows, like fingerprints. My parents said the bruises were from my bed frame. They said it quickly, like if they named something normal, it would become true. My mother didn't look too closely. My father didn't look at all. I didn't argue, because the doll was sitting in my lap while I ate breakfast, her warm weight settling me like a blanket. I started carrying her everywhere. At first, my parents encouraged it. They smiled more. They spoke softer. They acted like the doll was a miracle cure for whatever was wrong with me. Maybe it was. I didn't cry as much. I didn't ask for attention as much. I didn't follow my mother from room to room like a shadow anymore. I had something. The first time I noticed she didn't like sharing me, it was small. My mom leaned down behind me while I was coloring and kissed the top of my head. Just a quick, absent little kiss. My mom dropped her phone, and her fingers started twitching. The doll slid out of my arm. Not fell, slid, like my grip had loosened without my permission. She hit the floor with a soft porcelain knock. My mother stared at her own hand like she'd forgotten what it was for. Then she straightened up and walked away without a word. I sat there with my crayon hovering over the page, confused in a way that made my stomach feel hollow. The doll lay on her side on the carpet. Her glass eyes stared at me. She didn't blink, but I still felt watched. That night, I put her on the dresser instead of in my bed. I wanted to prove something to myself, that she was just a doll, that I could decide where she went. I turned off the light and climbed under the blankets. The dark pressed in. My room felt too big. My breathing felt too loud. I tried to sleep anyway. I woke up an hour later with the weight of her against my chest. Not beside me, on me, pinned there like a hand. My hands were already aching from holding her too tight, and when I peeled myself away in the morning, the bruises were darker. The changes didn't happen all at once. That would have been easier. That would have been obvious. They happened in little corrections, like someone was editing my life. At school, my teacher touched my shoulder when I got an answer right. A normal thing, a gentle thing. She dropped her book and shook her hand like it fell asleep. She flinched so hard her hand snapped back, like she'd touched a hot stove. Her smile wobbled. "You're cold," she said, and then she laughed like she'd made a joke. The kids at my table started scooting away from me at lunch. Not dramatically, not meanly, just a little, like they wanted space they couldn't explain. "Your doll freaks me out," one girl whispered. I looked down. I hadn't even realized I had brought her. I must have. My arms knew the rule, even if my brain didn't. The doll sat in my lap, her head tilted slightly, curls perfect, eyes glossy. I held her tighter. At home, my parents stopped touching each other. I noticed it because I didn't know why it was happening. My mom didn't lean into my dad when he passed behind her in the kitchen. My dad didn't rest his hand on her lower back when they stood side by side at the counter. They moved around each other like furniture. One evening, I walked into the living room and saw my dad kiss my mom. Just a quick kiss, barely anything. The lights flickered. Not a full power outage, not dramatic, just a stutter, like the house blinked. And when the lights steadied again, the doll was standing in the doorway. Not sitting, not leaning, standing upright, balanced on her perfectly aligned porcelain feet. The tag on her wrist swung gently, like it had just been tied. I froze. My dad froze too. My mother's hand went to her throat like she couldn't swallow. No one spoke. My dad crossed the room in 2 steps and snatched the doll up. His fingers gripped her like he wanted to break her in half. His face was tight, red. For a second, I thought he might do it. Then his eyes went unfocused. His hands loosened. The doll slid from his grasp like water. She hit the carpet. My dad stared at his empty hands. He backed away from her, shaking his head, whispering something under his breath like a prayer. My mother didn't move. I did. I picked the doll up and held her against my chest. Warm, heavy, safe. And my parents exhaled like I'd fixed something. That night, my mother tucked me in from the doorway. She didn't kiss my forehead. She didn't smooth my hair back. She stood there with her arms at her sides, like she was afraid her own hands would betray her. "Good night," she said. The voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The doll sat under my chin. Her glass eyes stared into the dark. And I understood something my 8-year-old brain couldn't fully shape into words yet. The doll didn't hate me. She hated everyone who tried to love me. We had a dog named Benny. He was old and slow and sweet, the kind of dog that leaned into you like he was trying to merge his bones with yours, the kind of dog that made you feel wanted even when everyone else was busy. He loved me. That was the problem. A thunderstorm rolled in late one night. It shook the windows and made the gutters roar. I woke up to a crack of lightning and the hollow boom that followed it. My heart raced. I turned towards my parents' room, ready to call for my mom. But my mom didn't come when I called anymore. Not really. She'd stand in the doorway and tell me I was fine. She'd tell me to go back to sleep. So I didn't call. I pulled the doll closer. Her warmth pressed into my throat. Benny scratched at the door. Then the door creaked open. He padded in, nails clicking softly, and climbed onto my bed with a grunt. He shoved his head under my hand like he always did, demanding petting. I smiled in the dark. I wrapped one arm around Benny's neck and one arm around the doll. For a second, I felt like a normal kid. For a second, I felt like I had both. Benny's body stiffened. He growled, low, deep, not like him. I stopped petting him. In the faint light from the hallway, I saw his eyes fixed on the doll. His lips pulled back, teeth bared. The doll didn't move. She didn't change expression. She just sat there, warm and heavy, her glass eyes catching the little bit of light like wet stones. Benny barked once, sharp and furious, and lunged. I screamed. The sound ripped out of me like it had been waiting. Benny's teeth snapped on air. The doll was suddenly in my arms again, pressed hard against my chest. My grip locked around her like a trap. Benny hit the floor, scrambling, barking, circling the bed like he couldn't find the right angle to attack. He dashed into the hallway, still barking, like he was screaming to my parents for help. My door slammed shut. Not slowly, not from the wind. It slammed like someone had thrown it, except no one was near it. Benny yelped. I heard his nails scratch at the wood. Then nothing. No scratching, no barking, no whining. Just the storm outside and my own breathing. I didn't move until morning. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. Benny wasn't there. There was no blood, no fur, just gone, except for his collar laying just outside my door. My parents didn't panic the way they should have. My dad walked through the house calling his name once, maybe twice, like he was checking a box. My mother stared out the back window with her hands folded, her face blank. "He must have gotten out," she said, and her voice was calm enough to make me sick. I looked down at the doll in my arms. Her dress was perfectly clean, but when I pressed my face into her curls, I smelled something faint and damp, like wet fur, like rain-soaked dog. For the rest of that day, my chest felt too tight to cry, and the doll stayed warm. After Benny disappeared, my mother stopped pretending. She stopped trying to be gentle with me, not because she was angry, because she was afraid. She moved around me like I was a dangerous thing in the house, like my love was a loaded gun. If I walked into the kitchen, she stepped back. If I sat on the couch, she chose the far chair. If I reached for her, she flinched. I started watching other families like I was studying a language I'd forgotten. A hand on a shoulder, a kiss on a forehead, a hug that lasted too long. I watched it like it was a magic trick, like it was something people did without consequences. In my house, affection had become an emergency. My dad started sleeping on the couch. I'd wake up at night and see him there, staring at the ceiling, with his hands folded on his stomach, his jaw clenched. My mother stopped singing while she cooked. She stopped humming. She stopped laughing. She became quiet in a way that made the air feel thin. Once I heard my mother laugh at something my father said, and then stop like she'd bitten her tongue. One afternoon, I came home from school with a good grade on a math test. I was proud. I wanted to show her. I ran into the kitchen waving the paper. "Mom, look!" She turned. For a second, something lit up her face. A real reaction. A real mother. Her hand lifted like she was going to pull me in, like she was going to hug me. The doll was in my arms, because the doll was always in my arms now. My mother's hand froze mid-air. Her fingers trembled, then her eyes went blank. Not closed, not rolled back, just empty. Her hand lowered. Her smile vanished like it had never been there. "Good job," she said flatly, and turned back to the stove. I stood there, holding my paper, my pride collapsing into something small and sour. I looked down at the doll. Her face was unchanged, but the warmth felt heavier, not comforting, possessive. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at her. "I don't want to hold you," I whispered. My voice shook. The doll stared back. I set her on the floor. I backed away like she might spring at me. I climbed into bed and turned my face to the wall. The room felt colder immediately. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I tried to breathe through it. I tried to be brave. Something touched the edge of my mattress. A tiny pressure, then another, soft, rhythmic, like fingers patting their way up. The weight hit my chest, not the doll's weight, something else, something pressing down. My lungs seized. I sucked in air and got nothing. Panic tore through me. I sat up, gasping, clawing at my throat. My hands found the doll and yanked her into my arms. The pressure released instantly. My breath came back in a sob. I held her so tight my arms hurt. The doll stayed warm, and I understood with a child's brutal clarity. She wasn't just taking my love. She was teaching everyone else that loving me was dangerous. I waited until my parents were asleep. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't live like that. I couldn't be held hostage by something that didn't even have to move to win. I had already stopped reaching out for people. I knew what would happen if I did. I crept into the kitchen with the doll tucked under my arm. The trash can was under the sink. I lifted the lid. I hesitated. The doll was warm against my ribs. For a second, I almost stopped. Not because I loved her, because my body did. Because my body had learned that her weight meant sleep, her warmth meant breath, her presence meant safety. I forced myself to do it anyway. I dropped her into the trash. She landed on her side among coffee grounds and wrappers. Her glass eyes stared up at me. I slammed the lid down and backed away like I'd just thrown away a live animal. I went to bed shaking. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. I didn't sleep. I didn't breathe right either. It started as a tightness in my chest, then a pressure, then the feeling of hands pressing down, firm and patient, like they had all the time in the world. I sat up, choking, clawing at my shirt. My throat made a thin, ugly sound. I stumbled out of bed and ran into the kitchen. I threw open the trash can. It was empty. The doll was back on my bed, sitting upright. Perfect curls, perfect dress, perfect glass eyes. I stared at her, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. My mother appeared behind me. I hadn't heard her footsteps. She stood in the doorway, hair messy, face pale, eyes wide and wet. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "I tried to," my voice cracked. "I tried to get rid of her." My mother's expression twisted, not into anger, into desperation. "You have to stop holding it," she hissed, like she was begging me. "You have to stop." "I can't," I said, and I hated how true it was. My mother took a step forward. The doll was in my arms again before I remembered moving. My mother's hands lifted. She looked like she was going to grab me, like she was going to pull me into her, like she was going to do the thing mothers do when their child is scared. Her fingers brushed my shoulder. For 1 second I felt it. Warmth that wasn't porcelain. Love that wasn't heavy. My mother sobbed. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my hair. The doll didn't move, but my mother did. She went still. Her arms loosened. Her sob cut off mid-breath. I pulled back and looked up at her face. Her eyes were open. Her mouth was curved into a small, calm smile. Not her smile, a practiced one, a polite one, like the smile my mom wore in grocery stores when strangers commented on my hair. She stepped away from me. Her arms dropped to her sides. She turned and walked back down the hallway, slow and smooth, like she was sleepwalking. "Mom," I whispered. She didn't look back. I stood in the kitchen with the doll pressed against my chest, my arms aching, my throat burning, my stomach hollow. My mother disappeared into her room and closed the door. I never heard her cry again after that. I never heard her sing either. And I learned at 8 years old the kind of love that can ruin you, the kind that demands to be the only one. I learned to live with her weight. What I never learned was how to live without being held. Epilogue. DAAA Case File. Department of Anomaly Analysis and Administration. Incident Summary Field Intake Report. Case ID DAAA OBJ08 HELDBIND. Classification: Attachment Hazard, Social Isolation Vector. Status: Monitored. Subject retained. Object description: one porcelain doll, approximately 45 centimeters in length, female presenting. Victorian style dress, pale pink. Brown glass eyes, human hair, unverified origin. Object emits measurable thermal anomaly, approximately 3 to 5 degrees above ambient during proximity to primary subject. No vocalization observed. No self-propelled locomotion documented. Object exhibits spontaneous relocation displacement events. Primary effects. Upon contact, object induces compulsive holding behavior in primary subject, hereafter subject A, with associated dependence markers. Improved sleep onset while in physical contact. Acute distress and respiratory restriction episodes during separation attempts. Involuntary reattachment behavior during nocturnal hours. Secondary effects. Non-primary individuals, hereafter subject B group, attempting physical affection or prolonged contact with subject A, exhibit involuntary withdrawal response, autonomic fear response without identifiable trigger, emotional blunting following repeated exposure, progressive avoidance behaviors consistent with conditioned aversion. Tertiary events. Object demonstrates displacement anomaly, returns to subject A's sleeping area within 0 to 6 hours following disposal removal attempts. Domestic animal disappearance event recorded. Canine, approximately 11 years old, Benny. No physical evidence recovered. Object exhibited transient odor anomaly, consistent with wet animal fur for less than 24 hours. Field notes. Subject A is now an adult. Object remains in Subject A's residence. Transfer attempt log failed. When asked to surrender the object, Subject A declined, stating, "If you take her, no one will ever touch me again." Recommendation: DAAA personnel are advised not to attempt forced separation. Object appears to enforce exclusivity through behavioral conditioning of surrounding individuals, resulting in long-term social isolation and emotional deprivation of subject A. Containment protocol. Maintain subject-related status. Monitor for spread indicators, secondary attachment events, photographic anomalies, relocation incidents. Recommend monitoring subject A for offspring/close contact dependence. Addendum. Recovered labeled transcript. Text reads, "She only wants to be held." End report.